everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. It's bright up here, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
It's bright because it's a bright topic. It's a bright topic that people think they know all about AR Cloud. People have heard about it. There's certainly a lot of potential in this domain. And this session is really to try to bring it to life for you and to understand what it means when there are going to be many AR clouds, when there are many different technology providers. I'm not going to be one of those technology providers personally. I'm an independent consultant. I've been working in the area of augmented reality for a very long time. I'd say longer than it's been fashionable. And it's a pleasure to have teamed up with some people on a new project, a new organization focusing on interoperability in AR cloud technologies starting about a year ago. And this panel then we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be AR cloud compliant or to be offering some technologies in that domain, how you work and find partners, how do you make it valuable to your customers, and ultimately how this is going to change everybody's experience of the world. So with that, that's me. That's what this panel is about. Jan-Erik, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jan-Erik Vinje. I have the pleasure and privilege to be the managing director of Open AR Cloud, and I get to work with thought leaders and pioneers from all over the world and from a wide range of professions. So Open AR Cloud is a global non-profit organization with a mission to drive the development of open and interoperable technology, data, and standards to connect the physical with the digital worlds, and do that for the benefit of all. So the day before AWE was a great day for Open AR Cloud. We held a symposium at the Ericsson Experience Center in Santa Clara. And we had 70 people coming there to hear us present the very first State of the AR Cloud report. That is a report that has been compiled in a short few months since we started in February by members of, we have 39 contributors from our different working groups who have worked really intensely to put together over 130 pages that can give, well, it's initial and a very initial overview, but I think it's made by people with very deep insight in the different professions they represent. So I really recommend you go to our website and download that.
As part of the report, there's a glossary. Could you and the other panelists define what you mean by AR Cloud before you turn it on?
Yeah, for me, AR Cloud, that is the essential set of different technological components that enables this coming era of real-world spatial computing. So it's not just spatial computing, it's focused on the real world where we come together. So we're sort of a little bit different than general spatial computing, which does a lot of things in VR. That is more a side thing to what we are focusing on. So, yeah.
My name is Eric Murphy-Chutorian. I'm the founder and CEO of Eighth Wall, which is a technology company that's really stressed trying to get augmented reality in the hands of as many people as possible by working on the existing infrastructure and the existing standards and the existing devices. And in many ways, one of the things that we're kind of well known for at this point is doing augmented reality on today's standard web. The web is built for two-dimensional graphics and visualization and text, but it has ability to use camera and use sensor data. It has the ability to tie into APIs that are map-based or location-based or geo-based or 3D-based. And what we've done is been able to take these technologies, integrate them together, and allow people to do web-based, geolocated spatial AR with today's technology. It's a bit different than things like the Open AR Cloud group, where you're trying to set standards for how these things should be interoperable. We've really focused on the interoperability they have today and being able to best leverage that without tying it to like a social network or a platform, but allowing people to build experiences, host them on their websites, and engage with kind of the open web as it exists today. To define AR cloud, generally when you have big paradigm shifts, it's really helpful to get behind key terminology on what you're doing or how to describe the technology or get behind. I mean, 5G as an example is a new technology around something we know very well, but the fundamentals about edge computing and the speed at which this can work changes the dynamics of what you think. And AR cloud is, again, this kind of, we know what the cloud is, we know what AR is, we know these things are very important, and by talking about it behind a strong definition like an an AR cloud, we're able to define that we recognize that the infrastructure that's here today isn't quite the right infrastructure for where we're headed, and trying to figure out what are the problems that we have today, how can we solve them, and how can we end up in a pretty good state.
My name's Edward Miller. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Scape Technologies based out of London. And we're focused on one very tiny but very important element of the so-called AR cloud, which is localization, determining the location of any particular device, specifically outdoors and at an incredibly large scale. So there are some companies focused on localization indoors. There are some companies who are focused on localizations at a building or even a street level. We're focused on providing a location service that uses a camera to determine your location orientation across an arbitrarily large amount of space. So given an area the size of a city, how can we pinpoint your location quickly, robustly, and accurately using computer vision? And in terms of what I believe the AR cloud is, there are lots of definitions that you will hear, some of which will have repetitive themes. Some people will call this the mirror world or the superverse or the metaverse. And actually, I think the AR cloud is just that. The AR cloud is a theme of a bundle of different components, some of which are to do with machine perception, which is getting devices to understand what it is that they are looking at in the environment and where they are. That is as applicable to self-driving cars and robotics and drones as it is to augmented reality. So machine perception is one piece of the wider theme of the AR cloud. And the second piece or theme behind the AR cloud is the geospatial content repository, saying that there is a particular piece of AR content at this particular location. Now that's very much AR specific, but they are both different components which can be dived into even deeper for various different use cases.
Well, hi, I'm Emily Olman, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spatial First. And Spatial First is building a mobile immersive platform for property visualization using augmented reality for mobile. And so we're very focused on being able to sort of unite the digital and the physical with our interface, right? So a spatial interface. So when we talk about what we're going to solve for, we're going to be able to solve for how do you interact spatially with property, with cities, with the buildings of the future. So for us, we're actually a consumer, if you will, of the AR cloud technologies. My background is in reality capture and real estate VR and AR for marketing purposes. So for us, we are sort of evaluating and looking at AR cloud both as a way to make our product better. So our first product is PlaceTime, is this application for this broker usage and broker leasing. And so it's that piece which is important to us as a sort of a component of our product. But I also feel very strongly that there's a stewardship that goes along with it and a responsibility for us to communicate to our customers and our, the landlords and the people that end up using our application. So that's why the Open AR Cloud Foundation and all of this is very important to me because I realize the responsibility of reality capture and mapping, which boils down a lot of the time to terms of service, for instance. And how do I define AR cloud? Well, very simply put, it's cloud services for augmented reality. and it's something that can't really be solved on the device. So that's just our simple definition of it. But it's as broad or as small as you want it to be.
Here's an even broader, hairier term, open.
Yeah.
Is it an open door? Does it mean free? No charge? It's loaded, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's there's so many different ways to achieve openness, and some of them are contradictory to one another.
So the web, that's like the ultimate definition now of an open platform. But when you go and look at the money, if you look at the top 10 companies on market capitalization, it's web companies. So there's going to be monetizations, there's going to be a business around this. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be very exciting because it's going to be introducing new opportunities to have new business models that we perhaps would like more than the ones we see now.
Any other comments on openness or the concept of interoperability is a term that I think is more clear, has more, well, it's a longer word, more syllables too, right? No. Anybody
Yes,
else have
definitely.
any comments on
No,
that?
it's more syllables for sure. Would anyone else like to go?
ahead.
No, I mean, open means a lot of things. Interoperability is kind of better spec, and this is what the internet is based off of. I mean, there's open source and there, but I mean, I think we've as an ecosystem, I think what people really do want to see is that as we move to a spatial computing world, as people are being able to build new business models, grow, reinvent, and be in the space, that if either that it's either some kind of constrained, not Wild West, but able to kind of do this in the ways that you want, or that the stewardship of this experience is in a way that you're moderated in a way that makes sense and seems fair. But I think the concerns people have is if one or two large entities are able to kind of be the stewards for approving content in that space or owning content in that space, that's where things get challenging and end up in, hopefully, but presumably what the open air cloud is trying to avoid.
Walled gardens is trying to, in essence, it's such an old term, it's a kind of a fun to go back to those old concepts of telcos and their walled gardens. In real estate, are there, we can draw an analogy between the web and what we see coming in this geospatial and the spatial computing. Are there concerns or are there special interpretations in real estate for open and what does interoperability mean?
Absolutely. So, open, I think for me, it's a question of, what information, open, can I author information openly and share that openly? Is that something that can be accessed by anyone? So the openness is also like, if you have a way to constrain information, so to say, well, in my building or in this property, I want to close this, I want to make this private, I feel like that is something that has to be protected. It's like fundamental to the way that we feel safe in spaces, or that we feel like we can, be, actively managing our property, right? Or the people that come into our property. So for me, it's like open and closed is a little bit like private versus public.
It's not open door.
Yeah.
It's not an open house.
Right.
It's
Yeah, so exactly. So but the openness, when you're talking about like having something that is interoperable and that we can all access, it becomes one of those very, very quickly you see, we want interoperability, and especially because we want to be agnostic and to be able to have choice. So when you don't have that, when you have something that's closed, you are limited to whatever is, permitted by the person that gives you access.
perfect.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
If I can just add to that, because the AR cloud isn't any one specific thing, it's very hard to say, right, we want to have this open AR cloud, and we want to get that AR cloud on a GitHub repository, and Bob's your uncle. Because it's bigger than that. It's not just a single piece of the puzzle. It's putting together all those pieces in such a way that is useful to us. And I think the sentiment that we all have is not necessarily about whether you're open sourcing it on GitHub or you're doing this or you're doing that, but it is about freedom to choose which services you want to use. It's about having interoperability between devices and just making sure that we're not reliant on Netscape or any one particular company to be able to control this future that we understand is going to be incredibly impactful in the next 10 years' time. I think that's fundamentally where it comes from.
Yes, very, very well put. I appreciate everybody's
To
perspectives.
add one thing, in our vision, we also take into the account the we the people type of openness, that free democratic peoples and communities should have a say and be able to influence the way that this technological ecosystem is being applied at their location, in their country, in their municipality. So that's the dimension to it.
So
the
it's
openness.
a participatory.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a dictatorship, it's a participatory process. It's not one, top down, it's kind of bottom up in a way.
Distributed. So it's
right.
not some people in Silicon Valley who defines how property law should be applied in Norway, because that's not respecting of the people of Norway and their freedom.
So I think that the next topic I'd like to kind of go from there. I know there's a lot of different products. Actually, it's interesting, there's a hub of activity in the Nordic countries around AR cloud technologies. I don't know why, but that's not the topic I want to go to. 3 people on our panel offer products and services. And so the next topic is, can you compare and contrast what you offer today with this vision and these principles that we were just discussing over the last 10 minutes? So let's bring it down to earth, right? Concrete. What do you offer today, and how does that compare with Open AR Cloud?
Well, so I have this product which we have been building for over a year, and I think that what is today's version of that is that it's in ARKit and Unity, but we haven't actually rolled out any of these integrations. And so we're in this phase where we are trying to evaluate which of the technologies, or maybe all of the technologies can be integrated into our app. And so right now, if you use the application, you're able to go into a property and to, of course, sort of calibrate yourself with a place to be able to see an augmented, experience, an augmented fit out. This is for a commercial space. And so, for us in the future, that changes dramatically when we actually can, relocalize and have the device know exactly where it is and where the content is, so that it is, sort of automatically happening. It's a seamless experience. So for us, that's the vision, right? And that's the hope, is that can happen in all types of spaces, in all types of places.
Residential, commercial.
Absolutely, right? So so for us, it's like we need to understand what is being offered with every SDK. We need to understand
strengths.
Right, the strengths and weaknesses, or the best practices as well. Like, how can we use this best? Because that's going to define our roadmap. Because that is, if you have a spatial interface, you need that functionality. So, yeah.
For Scape Technologies, I mentioned that the AR cloud as a theme contains both geospatial AR content as well as machine perception. And there are various different elements of machine perception that devices will need to understand about the world around them. And we believe that is a hierarchy. We believe that comes in a certain order that you need to go through doing so. And the number one thing that a device will need to understand about the world, whether it's a car or a robot or a drone or an AR device, is where am I? And being able to do that across an arbitrarily large amount of space is what we've been focused on for the last 2.5 years. So we have an API with an SDK that can be used on Unity for iOS, Unity for Android, as well as native platforms that you can query to understand or define where your device is in a geographical reference frame. So you send us a little bit of visual information, and we send back precise longitude, latitude orientation, so you know that you're anchored to a particular place. Now, once you have that, then you can use that how you see fit. You could use that to make sure that the Pokemon is exactly anchored to where you want it to be, or you could use that for other applications outside of augmented reality today. But really, fundamentally, the company is focused on allowing devices to understand where they are and what's around them using a camera. Because once you have that location piece, then you can start to understand where the observations that you make fit into the map.
Can you just clarify, though, that map that
Yes.
the location would fit into can only be a map created using your company's technology, or could it be using Here Maps or Google Earth, or can you, I mean, if you're going to define that your services are here, are you open underneath?
So
or
we use
above?
longitude and latitude, right? These open standards, they already exist.
No, but the capture, the reality capture.
So think about it like this. We return a longitude and latitude to you as well as an orientation frame. And at the moment, there is no other company that you can work with that we believe will return your location at a larger scale, as accurately or as robustly as our technology can do today. If there is a company that comes along or a solution that comes along in the future that allows you to do that, then fantastic. But the content that you display as a result of that initial location is the exact same. Because
you've already recorded it
Yes.
in your protocol,
Yes.
your formats.
Yeah.
Just double checking.
Yeah.
Everybody's not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. So you're actually not, you have to start with the reality capture using
Precisely.
a Scape technology toolkit, period.
So this is one of the chicken and egg problems that we realized 2.5 years ago. Obviously, in order to visually locate where you are, you need to have some sort of existing data set to be able to match against. And when we started, there were really only 3 companies that had the quality and density of data that allows you to even begin to do that. They were Google, who'd been mapping the world since 2007. I was one of Google's first street view photographers in the UK, so I could kind of see how that works at that type of scale. There was TomTom, who collected this data with their cars in a similar fashion for Apple Maps. And there's Here Maps as well. But beyond that, there were really no other options. And this data, this information about the world takes a huge amount of money and time to be able to go out and collect it. So of course, none of those companies were willing to share that with us, being as small as we were at the time. So we realized we had to figure out a way to brute force our way through the chicken and egg problem by going out and collecting imagery, essentially. Imagery that we've now collected in over 100 cities around the world, over 2 billion images, over enough distance to circumference the world several times over. And only because we've been able to do that groundwork can we build out this infrastructure that allows us to take that information, build them into 3-dimensional maps, and offer a service that can be built into. Now, at some point, we want that infrastructure, that service to be available, to be interoperable between devices. But right now, the priority is actually, frankly, getting it to work. Getting it to work reliably, getting it to work in all seasons, getting it to work and localize within a couple of centimeters, regardless of where you are. These are still big research challenges, and the speed at which companies are iterating in this research is so fast. It's a bit of a push and a pull for me with the AR cloud, because to try to create open standards around something which is changing so quickly is a very hard thing to do.
It depends on where you put them. Erik, what maps do you use, or what underlying infrastructure do you need for producing
I mean,
these?
actually, so AWE has been a very rewarding conference for me. We've built a technology that you can use on the web to see, visual augmented reality, and it's web tech. And we've always been saying you can tie this to whatever you want, whatever products you have, whatever web services, whatever else is running on the phone. And since I've been here, we've had a lot of companies come up to us or show us at their booth eighth wall powered technology that is doing things that we knew could be possible, but we had never kind of investigated ourselves. And these include things like I've seen now geocaching web apps built with Google Maps, where you see the Google Maps below and you see the visual eighth wall rendering, and you can walk around the world and unlock content. I had someone yesterday come up to me and give me a business card on his website powered by eighth wall, where when you look at it, you'll see a video playing of him telling him about himself with virtual buttons that will go into email applications, into the phone application, and essentially tie this augmented reality virtual card to other services that are already existing. We've seen it used in board games. We've seen it used. I mean, there's just so many demos that's like it's clear that
it's a glue.
There's glue in that this kind of thing where each of these services could tie together. I mean, I would love to see a Scape powered application running on the web. Obviously with or without eighth wall, but I mean, but being able to tie these things together in a way that these are components and building blocks that can be used to build anything people want, and presumably these things are greater than the sum of their parts.
Fantastic. Yeah.
It should be easy for you to set up a web service. You just pay for it, get the key, and then you could just send an image from the browser and get your post back.
We've done visual localization on a Raspberry Pi. It's because we push all the computation server side. So doing things through the web is a perfect marriage of that.
Should we go to our next topic? It's almost, I mean, I apologize, it's not that it's redundant. We should continue to expand the topic of the benefits of interoperability and how to get those at an engineering level. I really appreciate what you were saying, that, and I believe Emily knows this too, the engineering of these things is not trivial. And it's deceptive to try to say, well, just give us an API or just use the web. These are deceptively difficult, simple statements, difficult to deliver. So how can we achieve at an engineering level the kind of vision that we would like to share, the future we would like to share? I mean, can we encapsulate a few ideas here about achieving interoperability at an engineering level? GeoPose, I think, could be one of those.
Yeah, well, GeoPose is actually more on the standard level where you define a technical standard. Yeah, that's the engineering part of it. So we get a group of engineers together. We're actually talking with the Open Geospatial Consortium, and OpenAir Cloud is going to present a working group proposal to define universally how you actually define the position and orientation of any real or virtual object. So you could just put a few numbers into a format, and that describes that there's a virtual object exactly here. And you can come back 10 years later, and you see any type of localization technology. And if you have a GeoPose returned from a service, then you will be able to display that object exactly there. And
it could also be used in the localization of the user's device.
Yeah, the device pose. You can have the pose of a car. You can imagine any kind of. My favorite thing right now is imagining a stadium filled with people, and you have 50,000 people, 30,000 from Team A and 30,000 from Team B. Before the actual match begins, there's a showdown between the fans, and everyone has a GeoPose. And you're able to use your GeoPose to aim at targets down at the playing field. And one of the teams just win because they have better aim. And you can do that if you're working in a shared frame of reference, instead of having every device having their local X, Y, Z coordinate system and don't know how to translate all those other poses into this.
So thank you, that was a good example. Any other? How do we get from reality to, from vision to reality, or reality to vision?
I mean, for us, it's like, I'm sure people are familiar with Ori and Bar talking about this spatial Wikipedia. And so really for us, because we're trying to solve this problem of understanding a space, it's like we need to be able to connect the content with the location, right? So for us, it's about the geospatial indexing of that content, and how do we make sure that that has a precise location, and what is, you know, attached to that location. So you know, it's a good question about the interoperability. I think that you know, for us, if we are able to understand the lat long and elevation, we actually have the information that we need minimally to be able to you know, get the content to the, you know, get the, as also Google says, get the answers where the questions are, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish, and how we do it, all of the technical aspects of that, like those are the details that we are still working out. Like, I don't think that that's you know, completely solved.
How does Scape give pose?
So we use open standards of returning your location, and we can really return your location in whatever standard you want, whether that's longitude or latitude or any other type of reference frame that you need. I think you are right in saying that we need an open frame of reference, and that doing that with a agreed upon format is a good step towards doing that. However, we should also understand that it's not just about the format itself. To have 10,000 people around a stadium that all are tracking their geopose, and they're sharing that between each other, that's going to require a heck of a lot of service costs to be able to do that. That's not something that you can simply define a standard and everything will work. So there will be a challenge to figure out how we can provide those services in a way that doesn't inherently end up in a closed system, because you know, that's a huge amount of computation power, both in terms of networking as well as actually doing the machine perception pieces of the puzzle. And it's an open challenge.
Interestingly, I had a talk with Neil Crevette from the Kronos group, and they're all about hardware acceleration, about massively parallel computation. So for the stadium case, so if you will actually display in your device 50,000 other geoposes,
yeah.
Then if you hardware accelerate the translation between the geospatial coordinates and your local XYZ coordinates, that would certainly, so our idea, Open Air Cloud, we want to extend the OpenXR standard with that kind of hardware acceleration. So that's one of the ways towards
that open standard and making sure that things can work quickly on any hardware is a great necessary thing to do, but it still has to be powered by some sort of service that hosts that.
Yep.
And there is a kind of idea that actually maybe it would be more efficient if it were centrally organized. And how do you marry that up with the idea of being open? You know, does it make sense to chuck it on a blockchain? Does that automatically solve all our problems? And we all inherently realize that no, that's not going to do it. I don't yet know an answer of how to do that in a manner that is as free as open as the web today.
Eric, what are, in terms of what specifications, or you know, what's your preferred alphabet soup for eighth wall? What do people use?
I was gonna. So
W3C standards.
Well, I mean, we base our stuff off of web standards. They're, you know, historically have been W3C. There's some discussion recently about how going forward standards are going to be approved for the web. But I mean, I think in general that these are all really interesting things. I think generally when you're building lots of individual pieces, kind of doing a service level architecture where individual companies or individuals or groups or organizations build a service around the technology or the offering they think is, you know, maybe most appropriate. Letting people do this in a competitive format, and then being able to connect these things together is a very good way to scale these kinds of products, because some services will be ultimately incredibly successful, some will turn out to be not as important in the space, and then sort of the economics can dictate which are the ones that you really need for these kind of core.
Darwin at work, you know, select.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of, it's a bit of, you know, technical Darwinism, I guess. But even I mean, we have fascinating kind of conversation going on right here between Jan versus like, would you have a centrally stored service for doing large multiplayer installations? Or would you have a decentralized WebSocket, peer-to-peer, and WebRTC-based system for this? And what are the technical challenges with each?
Yeah.
Perfect.
And so, I mean, it's interesting. It's like, if we weren't talking about the stadium, but we were talking about maybe, you know, the people in this room, you could imagine a world where their phones are doing peer-to-peer communication, being able to crowd store and create some structure, be able to understand what's going on. But then you try to do that same thing in a stadium with 10,000 people, and you realize that all the internet, I mean, maybe in a 5G post-Wi-Fi world, this all just works. You can wave
Everybody
our hands.
has a node on their
But
page.
you know, there's this other thing where it's just no one has any service because we've, you know, exhausted what infrastructure in that place.
And then
got
that will be
about
locked
20
down to the 5G providers that offer it in that particular location.
They're gonna
We're
love
still
it.
in the same
Yeah,
situation.
I mean,
They're going to love it.
Yeah.
I think we'll all be tethered to our seats and won't be able to move anywhere.
Wires
That'll
is
solve the
the key.
problem. So we're going to move on to the last topic, which kind of has two parts to it. It's to build on what we've been talking about, these pretty hairy engineering problems. It's a non-trivial, for a foreseeable future, not always, not forever, but certainly for the next few years, maybe a decade, we're going to be working on these problems. Okay, engineers are going to be hard at work on our behalf. But in order to do that, I think that there's something else, which is all of the societal, regulatory environments, financial environments that surround this. So I have two questions. One is, if you set aside for the moment the tough technical problems, and you look at the long list of the other challenges ahead, societal, privacy, security, do I need to list them? We would still be here in 20 minutes if I did that. But what I wanted to know, like user experience, I think we can agree that's a tough one. Which of those is the highest priority for you and your company going forward? So you've got limited resources, you know that a lot of resources are going to be dedicated in engineering. What's the next level? And you can give me the second highest just for fun. And what are you doing to get there? Emily, what's the next below engineering?
So, when you have a product, we don't need to tell our customers exactly why it works. We need to show them that it works for them and that it's an experience that is just a flawless experience as a consumer of that. And that's what they care about. We don't message on our website, powered by AR Cloud. That's not the headline, right? The headline is what you can solve with it. And so I think that, of course, those big, hairy engineering problems persist. I love using the word persisting because we're always talking about the things that persist. But but for us, it's like, that's if we had a laundry list of things that we wanted to solve for first, we want to be able to solve, making AR accessible for real estate. That's our vertical. We want to make that something that people can use and feel like they have an understanding of, oh wait, this is a different way to explore the world. And people, maybe they've had experiences with Pokemon Go, they've had AR experiences on device, but we're talking about making it so that it's a new way of experiencing content. And
so is it an
it's so
education?
big.
Is it an awareness problem? You're saying that that's a challenge?
It shouldn't be a
Usability?
challenge. No, it should be intuitive. It should be something that happens.
Usability.
It should be an intuitive experience. So those are sort of the I guess it can be considered education, but it shouldn't take a rocket scientist or a Unity developer to be like, oh, I get it. That's really the core of it for me. And because property, there's billions and billions of square feet, right? So we're talking about massive scale. Outside scanning and cameras being everywhere on your device. I think that's the other thing, is understanding, again, I said it before, what is the private domain? How do I give a landlord the authority to be able to say, this is my official content? Okay. Right? So I'm thinking about it. Those are the societal things I'm thinking about. How do we
Specific to
build
your vertical,
building trust
within those solutions for those people.
Building
Fantastic.
trust.
Narrow it down, focus. divide the world, divide
We're
and
talking
conquer.
about scanning and creating a point cloud of wherever you are with a camera. So that's really what's happening. So it suddenly mushrooms into a much bigger societal question. But you can solve business problems with it as well. So we're starting,
Solve the problem.
yeah, stay
Edward,
stay
what's the
focused on that.
problem you're going to...
Well, Emily hit the nail on the head in terms of the difference between something working and something just working.
Yeah.
That's miles apart. And when we open up our Google Maps application today, we don't think about all the incredible, amazing engineering efforts that have gone into making that blue dot appear where it is. That's phenomenal. We don't have conferences today talking about how GPS works. It just works. It's always there in the background.
There were conferences about it.
I can bet.
Conferences about the mouse and how to make a mouse work.
So you can all have the same thing. No normal person wakes up in the morning wishes that they had a better localization engine. That I have dreams about this, but I'm sure we all do.
Maybe the CTO.
But it shouldn't be part of the consumer's lexicon, really. Actually, the AR cloud also probably won't end up being part of the consumer's lexicon. We see all these products that are out in the Expo, but actually these are still many of them in the research tool phase. We think of the HoloLens as one of the most unbelievable technological demonstrations that I've ever had. But you sit down in a restaurant, maybe outside of SF, and ask everyone if they know what a HoloLens is, and no one knows what it is because it's not a consumer product. And it's only when those consumer products actually emerge and you've got tens or hundreds of millions of people using them, that everything else can disappear and you realize that, okay, we don't care about the World Wide Web or www.facebook.com. You just use Facebook or you use Uber or you use a service. So when all of the technology can disappear, that's when we know that we have succeeded.
Okay, so you don't care about privacy. There's nothing in there. You did not say security. You didn't say content control, the user's control. Scalability, you touched on that one. Good user experience.
Getting localization to work robustly, securely, without going outside the realms of GDPR. All of that is something that we have to do inherently as part of the company. We have to make sure that our entire pipeline is GDPR compliant because we shouldn't need any more data than what GDPR sets up its guidelines for in the first place. All of our APIs are penetration tested. We can talk all about those issues, but the fact is, those aren't really the important things. The important things are just now having something that consumers can use, assuming everything else is in place, right?
That sounds still like a very technical answer. Like the focus of the problem is still a technical one.
It is.
And I'm trying to get you to talk about, suspend your disbelief. There is no technical problem anymore. Now what is that?
Well, the next thing after that is figuring out the killer application, because that's what the 5G companies are doing. That's what application developers, creators that are out there building things in Unity. There is still no killer application other than maybe Pokemon Go for AR today. That will be the next challenge over there. And I'm not trying to push aside security, privacy, questions like that. Those should be kept to the highest standards by default. And it's something that the AR Cloud, the group, is doing a tremendous job at making sure that's being talked about. But assuming that if you can persuade people, the policymakers, to put in the right guidelines to make sure that when people go outside of those guidelines, they're accountable, that's a good thing for all of us.
Okay. Comment?
We're hearing words like persist and location, and when you talk about these kinds of things, it's privacy and ownership. I mean, you own. I mean, people own land. You mentioned that longitude and latitude are open, but they're not. There are many longitudes and latitudes that I'm not allowed to go, that you're not allowed to go, and how does that move into the digital world? I mean, if I have a political sign I go into someone's OpenAR cloud and I go put it in Emily's
Yard.
You know, some of the houses or something. Am I allowed to do that? You know, we think of like domain squatting on the internet. You can now think of virtual domain squatting on other people's physical property. These are real problems. I don't think GDPR is necessarily considered specific things like what I can write on your house in a HoloLens app built by somebody else.
So ownership, consent, control of data, control of physical world.
Yeah.
Those are some of your concerns.
And then these all tie again back to privacy. It's like, what can I do in someone else's space, even if I'm 30 feet away and drawing on top of something? These are going to be real challenges, and this technology, as it becomes more and more spatial, is really going to tie to this concept of what's physical, what's private, what's mine, and what's mine in private. And I think, yeah, I'd love to see these things end up in a state where people have good expectations and good, reasonable privacy expectations around how
We
this
need a
stuff is.
law. This should be a panel of attorneys.
Yes.
There was
Not
one
if it's
yesterday.
raining.
There was one
Brian.
yesterday.
Brian.
Speaking of that, we had Brian Wasson
Yeah.
attending our panel at the symposium we held on Tuesday, and he actually was talking about how he has started to move his position regarding the freedom of speech in this context. It's not as simple as he originally envisioned it. So this technology creates some sort of unprecedented situations that we haven't had to tackle before. And certainly this very intense panel discussion we had was nowhere near resolving this. They could have gone on for many more hours. They would not have resolved it. So we really have to start this conversation now and look at it from different angles.
Maybe
technical
involve some
and legal.
lobbyists too, people who have an understanding about how to articulate the problem in a way that can be expressed in legislation or in policies. And I know sometimes it's not a language I speak, and but when I'm around people who command and speak that lobby language, I recognize it. I said, oh yeah, they know how to gloss over and make it sound like something I can swallow, you know, that I can accept. So there's a real technique, there's some talent there that we don't have here. I mean, no offense.
But Christine, I think that's the exact point, is that as the creators of the technology and as the people that are putting that into consumers' hands, it is our responsibility to see the sort of our knowledge gap, and also to remember that new standards, every time there's a new innovation, you know, we have a precedent set from the way that things have happened over many other evolutions of technology. This is not new, right? For us to say, oh, well, it's brand new technology. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So I think that we need to extend our hand to maybe lobbyists, maybe to other lawyers or consultants, people that have this expertise. Because we have our own walled garden of people that understand the technology.
Right.
And knowledge is this wall, you know? So in that way, I think we have to make sure that we go outside and look for that, you know?
Yeah, very good.
Niantic actually played a very good trick where they basically won a court case by saying, you know, how can it be invasive of people's privacy? Because all we essentially have is a database of longitudes and latitudes and Pokemon. You know, how on earth can that possibly be breaking any rules? But then when you realize that they are increasing the advertising cost on where those Pokemon are placed or objects are placed based on what latitude and longitude they happen to use, that gets very interesting.
Slippery.
Yeah, slippery is another word.
You know, I think before we turn it over to the Slido questions, and please, folks, get your questions up there and start voting on other people's questions. I'm going to kind of try to turn a negative idea into a positive idea, if we can do that. You know, there's been a lot of attention paid to fake news, to the negative sides of big tech. Perhaps, just to share you an example, I went to the Web at 30, and in contrast with the Web at 20, which was jubilation, the Web at 30 was disappointment, fear, a sad time. And so in that context, how can we make sure this doesn't end up as a sad time? How can we take the lessons that we are being taught now, in 2019, and make sure they're not applied? So communications, raising awareness, money.
That's it. It's great. I mean, you have to look at the values, right? You have to look at what are you going to place the value on. And if it's greed, then that is the thing that will, of course, contribute to this, closed architecture, right? So I would say
social good. How can we make this for social good? Any other ideas, gentlemen? I'm putting you on the spot, but I did ask you this question before, so.
The conversation that groups like the Open AR Cloud are bringing into the public discussion is exactly what we need, and I think that is one of the biggest positives of the Open AR Cloud today in terms of bringing that discussion out into the open. People are talking about privacy, people are talking about security, people are talking about what it means now to own a digital representation of a physical space, which is good. We need to do more of that. There needs to be more, let's call them guidelines, like GDPR, but for those particular elements. The state of the AR Cloud report that the Open AR Cloud put together is actually one of a really great resource that is pushing that conversation forwards.
Okay.
So more of that.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I just, not to make light of it, it's like the web at 20 thought it was invincible. In its 30s, it realized it wasn't. It's going to suffer a midlife crisis, maybe buy a Tesla, and then move on to
40 or 50.
Yeah. No, I mean, with all this new technology, things always happen fast. They always happen quickly. Then people look at the results, realize the issues and mistakes, with good optimism, can then go and address these things and come out with a better version of what we're seeing. And I think this is an example where, having, freedom of speech, that's an amazing thing. That's one of the things we cherish the most in the country. If you,
the world.
Yeah, in the world, in the country and the world. Now we have a world where it's so easy to communicate to such a broad audience that has unintended consequences, for better or worse. But they're definitely different than they were previously, and that raises a lot of awareness around them. And the question is, where do you go from there? Do you continue down this path as it turns out this is, the new norm? Or are there other things that go into place? And these are kind of very interesting questions and not what I do think about day to day. But I mean, I think I would imagine that if the web at 30 was a depressing place, the web at 40 will again be very different and look nothing like it did at 30. And I'm optimistic we'll be in a pretty good spot.
Well, I hope so. I hope you're right.
Me too. But I'd say that's
So
maybe
Jan-Erik,
my
maybe
view.
you would like to answer this one of.
I would just start. I think like Open AR Cloud, we think about this transition that we're in front of now represent a fresh start. Sort of, we have the opportunity to create a digital renaissance. That's sort of like a word we're using. Mm-hmm. So we have this bright vision of how the machine-readable world can enable all sorts of good things, like helping people who are blind, like helping local communities flourish, instead of having this concentration about like power and wealth in some parts of the world. Then local communities, since the technology is essentially very distributed, the data is distributed, the value is distributed, that creates new opportunities. So if we can take the best from the open web and bring that into real world spatial computing and help essentially the world flourish on basis of that, that's sort of the high level vision of Open AR Cloud.
And I think that you're answering the second question there very, very nicely, and can get behind that. So let's consider that one done. As a developer, what would you recommend? I guess this would be,
So the question is, as a developer, how can I participate in the development of the AR Cloud? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of opportunities. So there are, just to throw out one example, first in a standards committee side, there's the Immersive Web working group, which is working on trying to take this AR, I mean, all this mixed reality and spatial computing technology and put it into web standards that are going to support not just mobile phones, but all the next generation of headsets and projectors. And these are dealing with issues like, how do I control my hands? How do I use controllers? How do I navigate space? If there's no URL bar, how do I know I'm at the right site? I mean, there's privacy concerns, security concerns, and these are things that people can participate and join. I'm not going to speak to what you can do on the open AR cloud, but I assume there's always opportunity to join and to participate and to do things.
As a developer, do you have some specific suggestions? I think he means that question
Software,
is
yeah.
software
Purely around
developers.
software? Well, I'd say as a pure developer, this is an opportunity to build things in the space, understand how they work, and then communicate them back to people. And if you can build something that gains real traction, you're going to help educate how this technology is usable, how it can be applied to other situations, and really help drive the discussion around AR cloud development.
Thank you. I'm going to take what standards are being explored. We thank
Sure,
you for mentioning the WebXR device API protocol from Immersive Web Working Group. Open Geospatial Consortium has already quite a little library, a large library actually. And there hopefully will be another one in there, the GeoPose, and people could participate in that. I think the Kronos group with OpenXR, with WebGL, GLTF, and there are others coming. Did I leave anybody out? The IEEE, there's the ARLM, AR.
We're looking
for
also
learning
like exploring the standards for the machine-readable world, how we agree on the machine-readable world to describe it. That's a big one. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah, not sure who's going to take that on. It probably won't be me, but I hope it's someone on this panel or someone in the audience that joined us here today. Thank you very much, panelists, for your attention and your participation. It's been really good.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting.
Thanks so much.